brothers and sisters, 6 years on, those hopes have been dashed. Instead of the prosperity and progress that was promised, the last 6 years have been perhaps the most difficult and challenging period of our history as a country. This government has been clueless and in many ways...
All right, so welcome back. This is Inside Pages on Metro Television. My name is Aldo Moro, and as I did indicate at the beginning of the show, that we have two very important subject matters to look at. One has to do with the former president's launch of his campaign in the Volta region, where the former president is promising to rejig our governance architecture, without whom we won't be able to make any progress. In fact, he's walked us through quite a number of them. I want us to go back and watch the former president walk us through some of the things that he intends to do. And then when we come back, we will start our conversation.
My brothers and sisters, 6 years on, those hopes have been dashed. Instead of the prosperity and progress that was promised, the last 6 years have been perhaps the most difficult and challenging period of our history as a country. This government has been clueless and in many ways callous. The unthinkable has happened, and our country today is broken on all fronts. Ghana is bankrupt. We are saddled with debts we simply cannot pay, and we have suffered the global humiliation of defaulting on our debts and being downgraded by all credit rating agencies to the lowest level ever seen in our history. Our economy is in the worst ever shape, with suffering and pain on an unprecedented level. Hyperinflation and ever-increasing price of basic items, including food products, have all combined to inflict unbearable pain on millions of Ghanaian households. Parents are being forced to make the choice between seeking prompt health care for their sick children or providing meals with their meager resources for their families. Our middle class stands the real risk of being wiped out on the back of an obnoxious debt restructuring program. The poor who depend on the middle class for employment and sustenance are on their own and uncertain of their fate in the future. Our aged pensioners and the elderly have not been spared either. In the past few weeks, they have been compelled to stage public manifestations outside the Ministry of Finance in defense of their livelihoods, even in this elderly state. Who would have thought that Ghana will come to a juncture like this, where a government would mete out such shabby treatment to our senior citizens, whose only crime is that they put their life savings in what is considered the safest financial instrument in the world, government bonds. We are at this most depressing phase in our history, where our economy has been destroyed because of the systematic mismanagement, misguided and clueless policy choices and the incompetence of President Nana Akufo-Addo and his Vice President Mahamudu Bawumia. While our people struggle to keep their heads above water, government officials continue to exhibit high levels of greed, corruption, arrogance of power, dishonesty, blatant state capture, and conflict of interest. Unsurprisingly, no one in this MPP government wants to take responsibility for anything, including their flag-bearer hopefuls, most of whom were part of the economic management team, the team that was called the solid team. Today, everybody is running from taking responsibility. They continue to lay blame for their disastrous economic management on external factors, whose relationship with our present sorry circumstances are at most tenuous. We all know that this economic collapse has been years in the making, just as we know it was entirely avoidable. Amid all the suffering, government remains obstinate and refuses to back down from the costly missteps that led us here in the first place. They continue to waste the precious little we have on dodgy and misguided projects and programs and on a bloated government. as they tighten the noose on the helpless citizens by piling on more taxes and expropriating our money through measures like the domestic debt exchange, government offers no semblance of genuine sacrifice on its part. The national decay of the last 6 years has not been limited to the economy. It extends to all aspects of our lives. Our hitherto trusted state institutions today stand as pale shadows of themselves, undermined and politicized to the extent that they consider themselves as an extension of the governing New Patriotic Party. The youth of our country, the young people, male and female, see no future in the country of their birth. They see no silver lining at the edge of the clouds, which often appears only dark and gloomy, with no ray of sunshine seeping through. And who's to blame them when after years of struggling to earn an education, they are condemned to unemployment and acute lack of opportunities in their own country? Our aged pensioners and the elderly have not been spared either. In the past few weeks, they have been compelled to stage public manifestations outside the Ministry of Finance in defense of their livelihoods, even in this elderly state. Who would have thought that Ghana will come to a juncture like this, where a government would mete out such shabby treatment to our senior citizens, whose only crime is that they put their life savings in what is considered the safest financial instrument in the world, government bonds. Unsurprisingly, no one in this MPP government wants to take responsibility for anything, including their flag bearer hopefuls, most of whom were part of the economic management team, the team that was called the solid team. Today, everybody is running from taking responsibility. They continue to lay blame for their disastrous economic management on external factors, whose relationship with our present sorry circumstances are at most tenuous. We all know that this economic collapse has been years in the making, just as we know it was entirely avoidable. Amid all the suffering, government remains obstinate and refuses to back down from the costly missteps that led us here in the first place. They continue to waste the precious little we have on dodgy and misguided projects and programs, and on a bloated government. As they tighten the noose on the helpless citizens by piling on more taxes and expropriating our money through measures like the domestic debt exchange, government offers no semblance of genuine sacrifice on its part. In a crisis situation like this, it is my belief that this country can be governed efficiently with 60 ministers and deputy ministers. We will initiate and undertake the most far-reaching constitutional, political, and governance reforms under the Fourth Republic, which will be aimed at restoring confidence in our democracy and governance systems while making life easier and better for the people of Ghana. In response to the concerns and calls from many of you, we will initiate and undertake the most far-reaching constitutional, political, and governance reforms that will restore confidence in our democracy. We'll continue and bring to conclusion the constitutional review process that was begun by the late President Atta Mills, which will include a review of the controversial Article 71 to reduce the number of office holders under Article 71 and reduce the disparities in privileges and emoluments vis-à-vis the public sector and civil service. The payment of ex gratia to members of the executive under Article 71 will be scrapped. And the necessary constitutional steps to abolish that payment will start in earnest in 2025. We will also begin the process of persuading the other arms of government other than the executive to accept the removal of these ex gratia payments. At this stage, Ghana demands experience, not experiments. Ghana demands togetherness and not divisiveness. Now is the time for bravery of heart and clarity of purpose. I'm offering myself for public office at this time because I appreciate the enormity of the task ahead, owing to the level of damage that has been done to our country by this government. And I also know that such a mountainous task requires a steady, unifying, and experienced hand to build the Ghana we want together. And as I said, this is no time for experimentation. Ghana at this time does not need a try-me-too leader. Our country at this time urgently needs a leader with an unwavering desire to get things done in a no-frills, no-thrills, business-like manner. Not one enamored with sloganeering, excessive partisanship, personal comfort, and shallow populism. Ghana's next leader should exercise sound judgment and be able to make the right calls at the right time. A leader who accepts responsibility and works to fix the problem, and not one who shifts blame onto others. The leader should be one whose heart is filled with compassion for the people and who has the humility to connect with and understand the needs of the people he serves. Our country requires a visionary leader who will build a prosperous and progressive Ghana for all Ghanaians and not just a few family and friends.
All right, welcome back. You heard the former president, John Dramani Mahama, as he launched his campaign in the Volta region. That was over the weekend. Now, you heard him walk us through some of the far-reaching reforms that he intends to bring about when Ghanaians make him president again. Now, let me just quickly introduce my resource persons for today. Now, I have Mr. Kwame. Let me start with it. Okay, so Ibrahim Murtala Mohammed is here with us. So Ibrahim Murtala Mohammed is a member of parliament for the Tamale Central constituency. Is here with us. Good morning, sir. Thank you very much. Side pages. Let me also say that Mr. Richard Ahiagba is the director of communications for the New Patriotic Party. He's also joining us via Zoom. Mr. Richard Ahiagba, are you there? Good morning. Hello, Richard. Hello, Mr. Richard Ahiagba. Okay. All right. Richard, please unmute so that I can hear you. All right. So once he's working on it, let me also say that Mr. Kwame Asiedu Sapong is a fellow with the Center for Democratic Development. He's also joined us via Zoom to give us his brief thoughts about the former president's campaign launch and some of the things that he said. And also let me say that lawyer Rindolph Chumesiapia is a private legal practitioner. He'll also be joining us. In fact, he's joined us via Zoom as well. So good morning, guys. Thank you very much for joining us. May I please see you?
Good morning.
Okay, so let's sort out this technical challenge so that I can have the three
other
resource persons who have decided to join us virtually to give us the opinion or thoughts about the former president. Can you guys hear me now? Mr. Richard Ahiagba, Mr. Kwame Asiedu Sapong, and lawyer Rindolph Chumesiapia. Can you three now hear me, please?
Yeah, yes, I can hear you clearly.
I can hear you. But the name is not Apia, it's Ankra, Rindolph Chumesiapia.
Okay, can you three hear me, please?
Yeah, I can hear you well.
I can hear you as well.
Hello?
Hello?
Okay.
We can hear you.
So at least can you say hi so that I'm sure that yes, we are on, basically.
Yeah, we can all hear
you. If you please unmute your mic. I think that's where the problem is. Okay.
We can hear you.
Okay. Well, please let's sort it out because I can see them, but I can't hear them. Even though they can hear me, I can't hear them, even though they can hear me. So let me start with Murtala Ibrahim Mohammed, or Ibrahim Murtala Mohammed, who is Member of Parliament for the Tamale Central constituency. Now, Murtala, first of all, let me again say a big thanks for you accepting to join us this morning. The former president launched his campaign in the Volta region. We heard some of the things that he said he intends to do when Ghanaians give him the nod to become president again. First of all, why the choice of Volta region?
Well, I think that, anyway, good morning.
That's fine.
Good morning to your cherished viewers, and good morning to my colleagues who are joining us via Zoom.
Okay.
And of course, good morning to the good people of Tamale Central. Moro, if you permit me, there is a launch of the Bank Development Fund today.
Okay.
I was actually supposed to be there, but you remember that Alaji Jawles today is the funeral at the, I think that the official funeral at the forecourt of Parliament.
Okay.
And also, of course, this program. So I just want to state why I'm not in Yindi.
Okay. Please get a bit closer to the mic. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
It is important to understand that every political party, you make decisions based on some information and the strategies that will inure to your benefit. You know that the Volta region has been one of the strongest, support base of the NDC. And President MAHAMA, as a president and also as a candidate in both 2008 elections when he was a running mate to Prof. Mills, and the 2012 elections when he was a candidate himself, enjoyed tremendous support from the Volta region. And he has actually launched his campaigns in other regions. So this time around, he decided that he must launch the campaign
in the Volta region.
Okay. So there's nothing special
Right.
or something extraordinary why he did so. He could have done it in any region.
Right.
But because of perhaps one of the reasons I just stated, the Volta region has been described as the World Bank of the NDC.
Right.
And there couldn't have been any better place
To
for
launch
him
the
to
campaign.
launch his campaign than
Wow. Great.
Volta region.
Thank you very much. So let me come back to our Zoom link and see whether I can have Kwame and Randolph and the rest. And Richard, I can go as well. Good morning, guys. I hope that we have a better connection now. Great. Wonderful. I can hear you. Good morning, Kwame. Good morning. Good morning, Richard. Wonderful. And then how about Randolph? Randolph, you can hear me too, can't you?
Yes, I can hear you.
Great. Now I think we can proceed. Now I'll start with Mr. Kwame Asedu-Sapon. Now Kwame has to leave at some point because he has other engagement. So please bear with me on this. Indulge me. I'm going to start with Kwame. Kwame, when Kwame is done, is going to leave us, and then the two of you will be on. Now, Kwame, let me, in order that we do not take the former president out of context, I would want to read that portion of the former president where he starts to talk about the reforms that he intends to introduce into his governance, in order to sort of rejig our governance architecture. Now, one of the reasons why, Kwame, my production team tells me you joined us is also because it's something that you're very passionate about, because you don't think that we can make any significant progress as a people if we don't do something about the Constitution. So the former president says, I shall assemble and operate the leanest but most efficient government under our Fourth Republic. We will reduce significantly the size of government. As I announced in my Ghana We Want address at UPSA last year, I will form a government of less than 60 ministers and deputy ministers of state. I will initiate and undertake the most far-reaching constitutional, political, and governance reforms under the Fourth Republic, aimed at restoring confidence in our democracy and governance systems while making life easier and better for our people. In response to the concerns and calls from many of you, I will initiate and undertake the most far-reaching constitutional, political, and governance reforms aimed at restoring confidence in our democracy. We will continue and bring to conclusion the constitution review process begun by President Mills, including a review of the controversial Article 71 to reduce the number of office holders and remove the disparities in privileges and emolument vis-a-vis the public and civil service. The payment of ex gratia to members of the executive under Article 71 will be scrapped. Now, here's the thing. The payment of ex gratia to members of the executive under Article 71 will be scrapped. The necessary constitutional steps to abolish that payment will start in earnest in 2025. I will also begin the process to persuade other arms of government to accept same. Issues pertaining to the excessive powers of the president, proper separation of powers, strengthening of parliament, restoring true independence to the judiciary, independent and quasi-independent state institutions, and depoliticizing them will take center stage. With renewed vigor, we'll work to restore confidence in all institutions of state so that our people will see their institutions working for them as they should, with utmost professionalism and non-interference from political actors. First of all, what are your general thoughts, even before we look at the specifics, Kwame?
My general thoughts, I mean, there's a swell of opinion that the ex gratia payments are very, very wrong. It's frowned upon generally. I mean, when you listen, and I'm talking from a place where, as you know, I work in the civil society space, and one of the things he does is a lot of service. So if you look, it's something that is frowned upon. But I also bear in mind that it's an entrenched part of our constitution. And so to get rid of it requires certain legal processes to take place. So when the former president tells me that he would abolish it and that the constitutional processes will be started, the first thing I want to understand is that promise was made in 2015. Why was it achieved then? What are the learnings of the former president as to why it wasn't achieved then? And what makes him think, and how do these learnings inform his strategy to abolish it this time? That said, I can see one aspect as well, which is the fact that he could simply say, as for the executive, before you serve in my executive arm, you need to sign an undertaking that you are going ex gratia, even before the legal framework is started, which then makes it conditional that if you are accepting an appointment, you know this is the end game. It would be his right to do that if he wanted to do that. Even though it's in the constitution, you can say that we're foregoing it, such as some governments have said, oh, we are cutting salaries by 30%, or we're doing this, we're doing that. A president can do that. But that would only be a halfway house because it would still be in the constitution, allowing others to use it should it not be taken out. And that is why for me I ask for a timeline as to what is your strategy? What is your game plan? How long is this going to take? And when I ask for a timeline, a lot of people say, well, when it comes to constitutional matters, you cannot give a timeline because obviously the other arms of government have to play more. Parliament has to play more, even if you bring the necessary instruments to Parliament. But I have said, well, in the executive does it, and Parliament kicks it into the long run, then we know who the problem is, and we know as citizens who to address our hands against. And so I would start from this broad framework to say that I need to understand where the president is coming from and his learnings from his previous state as head of state, issuing that promise and why it wasn't implemented.
Now, you talked about the fact that the former president made a similar promise in 2015, and so for you, it's not new. Yeah, I agree. In principle, it's not. But then I checked. Now, in 2015, I had I've just read the former president saying that he was actually rallying organized labor to join the government to basically start the conversation about the payment of ex gratia. You wouldn't say that's the same as saying that when I come, I will initiate processes towards, ensuring that the thing about ex gratia becomes a thing of, the problem of ex gratia becomes a thing of the past. Or you think for you is the same thing?
Well, look at it. We operate a democracy. A democracy is a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. Organized labor is a big part of the people we talk about when we talk about democracy. So if you said you were starting a conversation, is there any evidence of that conversation? What were the telltale signs of this conversation? What did you learn from the conversation? Was ordinary labor amenable to getting rid of ex gratia? At what point did the conversation truncate? And how has it helped in the evolving of your current position? We deserve to know this. We deserve to know this. And so for me, it's one and the same thing. The bottom line is ex gratia has become an albatross around our necks. For many people, it's obnoxious because when civil servants, public servants, teachers, soldiers work for an entire career span till they retire, they get nowhere near these payments. The other thing you have to look at is a lot of these politicians come, they beg us to serve. They tell us they are coming to serve. Now you beg, seek my mandate, I give you the opportunity to serve me, and you say, then when I finish serving you, when I begged you to serve, you've got to give me a parachute handshake for me serving you. Did I force you to come and serve me, or you begged me to come and serve? And that for me is the crux of the albatross we call ex gratia. And therefore, whichever way you couch it, I wouldn't devolve what was said in 2015 from what has been said in 2023.
Now, Kwame, you talked about the fact that the former president, when he becomes or when he gets the opportunity to become president again, can, for instance, start by asking persons who are interested in becoming ministers under his government to say that, look, if you want to be a part of my government, then you cannot, or I'll ensure that you do not get ex gratia at the end of your tenure. Now, and then you say, when the president starts, then he would have given the clearest indication or signal that he means business. And then when he starts conversation with the other arms of government, who, depending on the response they give, we will then get to know who exactly wants to come on board or not. What kind of challenge or obstacles do you foresee the president, facing with this decision to start, to start the initiative to scrap ex gratia? What kind of bottlenecks do you foresee or anticipate the president will face?
Well, to start with, our democracy is a monocracy. I mean, none of us can run away from. Another albatross in that monocracy is political party financing. And the fact that a lot of these MPs would have come into power either, for want of a word, through the benevolence of some groups of people who they owe favors to. Some even will not take loans from the banks and from friends. So for them, the parachute payment of ex gratia is what they get at the end of the day to clear all these unseen debts. So now, if you're going to tell someone like that who's gone through the 2024 elections with these hidden forces to get a seat in the parliament of the Republic of Ghana as our representative, to forego the money that he has hoped would be used to defray all these things, then obviously either you are showing him an alternative to defray those costs, or that person is going to dig in their heels. So that is one challenge I see. Then you also have to realize that we've also got the judiciary, who are also beneficiaries. And then we've got people who are not strictly Article 71 office holders, who have managed to couch some of these Article 71 benefits into their conditions of service. We know that, especially in parastatals and all that. All these people would have contributed to the campaign to realize the presidency of whoever wins in 2024, irrespective of which party you're looking at. So all these people would want to get a share of the cake. Now you come in and you say, I want to abolish this. I don't think all these people would be happy with it. And then we've got a lawyer there. I know that if there's an entrenched provision, it seems to me that even to get rid of it, you can go through parliament, but there may have to be a referendum. The thing, if I am correct, and there may have to be a referendum, the thing about abuse, whether it's spousal, whether it's political, is that a section of the abused begin to fraternize with the abusers and find the abuse, for want of a word, sexy. So to get the threshold, if we have to go through a referendum to get rid of this, in itself could be a challenge. So there are a lot of things. So there would need to be a lot of education. There would need to be a lot of arm twisting. There would need to be a lot of negotiations. And for me, those are the challenges that the president would face. But that doesn't mean it cannot be surmounted. Because like I said, if you start with the executive and we see the people who are standing in their way, then as citizens, we can go after these people through debates, through civil actions, for them to understand that we find this obnoxious. And that is, for me, the way to go.
All right. Kwame, I'll let go of you because, like you said, we would agree that you would have to leave at early so that you can attend to your other engagements. Kwame, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks for having me as well.
Thank you. So we can now talk to lawyer Randolph Chumisiapia. Now, Randolph, I would want you to help us appreciate what it would take for a president to begin the processes of abolishing ex gratia for that of the executive, the legislature, and all the other arms of government. First of all, what was the thinking of the crafters of the Constitution in introducing this policy? From your standpoint, has it served us well? 3, do you think it's a good idea for us to scrap it? And if we have to scrap it, what do we need to do to be able to scrap it?
So thank you, Moro. Please, before I proceed, let me just correct the name. My surname is not Apia, it's Ankra.
Ankra, sorry. Sorry about that. So, apologies.
So just to answer your questions. First, I believe that we have to understand the whole purpose of Article 71 within our constitutional framework. Now, and if I'm permitted to proceed on that, Article 71 has more often than not been blown out of proportion, as though it is a provision that says that persons or certain category of officers are entitled to ex gratia. Article 71 never says that. So we have to make that distinction very, very clear. What Article 71 of our Constitution does is to outline the procedure for determining salaries of certain public office holders. So if you look at Article 71, it gives a category of public office holders: the Chief Justice, the Chairperson of the Electoral Commission, Chairperson of NCC, that's National Civic Center for Civil Education, National Chairperson for the Commission of Higher Education. It gives category of public office holders and how their salaries should be determined, and then goes on to give the power, a power to the president to set up a committee of 5 on the advice of the Council of State or the recommendation of the Council of State. And it is that committee that determines the salaries of these category of officers listed under Article 71. So Article 71 itself does not create ex gratia. And we have to make that point very, very clear. And that is my understanding.
Okay.
Now, ex gratia payments is attached to certain offices. And in fact, ex gratia is in essence gratuity payments. And if you look at the constitutional provisions, not all the public office holders listed under Article 71 are in strict sense entitled to the payment of gratuity or ex gratia. Not all of them. the category of officers that the Constitution itself expressly mentions are MPs under Article 114, the President under Article 68, 4 and clauses 4 and 5, Superior Court justices of the Superior Court of Judicature who have served for a continued period of 10 years or more under Article 155. Now, if you comb the entire other provisions of the Constitution, you will notice that sometimes, for instance, the chairperson of the Electoral Commission, the Commissioner for Shraj, it says that their conditions shall be the same as that of a Court of Appeal judge or a High Court where appropriate. But it does not strictly mention that their salaries, pensions, and allowances facilities would include gratuity, as it specifically mentions in Article 68, Article 114, and Article 155. So let us confine the gratuity payment to the proper persons which the Constitution actually intended. Now, having made the point, if you look at Article 68, and I'm not making any justification, you asked me to give whether it's proper. Yeah. If you look at Article 68, which talks about the conditions of service of our president, there's a provision in the same Constitution which says that when a president leaves office, he shall not or she shall not take up any other office for profit. In effect, we are saying that once you leave office or retire as president, you cannot work again for any emolument or profit, unless with the consent or permission of Parliament. So in my thinking, some of these provisions have been put there to cushion the president who we have, by our own Constitution, stopped or prevented from working when he leaves office, regardless of his age or her age. Now, the same provision finds itself in Article 155 of the Constitution with regard to judges, that when a judge leaves office or retires from office, he cannot take up any other private office for profit. So my thinking is that it is with these two categories of officers, it is because the law does not allow them to work anymore when they leave office. That is why we have to pay certain amounts of money to them. But even with that, the Constitution says that they will retire on their salary, not necessarily gratuities. So the gratuity payment should be separated from the other constitutional benefits that they are supposed to get. Now, if you come to Parliament, and that's under Article 114, the Constitution says that a member of Parliament who ceases to be or retires, let me just use, loosely speaking, let me use retires from Parliament, shall, in addition to any other benefits, loosely speaking, get a gratuity. So these are the constitutional provisions that determines what certain category of officers should get. So my thinking is that any officer listed under Article 71 whose establishing provision under the law, that is a provision of the Constitution which creates that office, if it does not go ahead to add gratuity to their benefits, in my thinking, they are not entitled to it. I see. And if that thinking is right, then we have just a few officers, that is the president, MPs, Superior Court judges, and in some instances, maybe the chairperson of the Electoral Commission, and then the Court of Appeal, among some others. Ministers are not entitled to that. Deputy ministers are not entitled to that. Other appointees of the president are not entitled to that. Staffers of the office of the president are not entitled to that because they are not within the category of officers that gratuity is supposed to be paid. Now, if I may just briefly also talk about why we have Article 71. And also, let's note that Article 71 has been with us as far back as 1969. It was in the 1969 Constitution. It was repeated in the 1979 Constitution. And the framers of our Constitution thought it wise to keep that practice. And one of the thinkings that went into it is because the framers of the Constitution did not want a situation where Parliament would be left to itself to determine how much they should get as their salaries or benefits. And the vice versa is also true, that they didn't want to leave the determination of how much the government or the executive should also pay itself to the executive alone. So there was a need for a balancing act. Hence the introduction of a committee on the recommendations or on the advice of a committee, the president will fix the salary or that salary. So that is why we have that Article 71 procedure in our constitution. Now, having made that point, the president, that's His Excellency John Mahama, in his speech indicated that he would scrap ex gratia payments to members of the executive. And you are asking whether that is possible. Fortunately for us, members of the executive include the president and his appointees, or the government. And as I've already indicated, not all persons who form part of the government or who are members of the executive are entitled to that ex gratia payment. So we are left with only the president and his vice. And my thinking is that, first, Article 68 of the Constitution creates a right for the president that you shall be entitled to gratuity in addition to your pensions, salaries, and other benefits. So being a right, and all lawyers will agree that being a right, you have a right to refuse it. So if the president says that he's not going to accept it, it is actually well within his rights. And it will actually be the easiest thing to do in stopping the ex gratia. So that is one of the ways by which the president or subsequent presidents can ensure or curtail this ex gratia payments.
No, but
secondly,
sorry, Randolph,
okay.
If you're saying that if it's within his right, he's entitled to it as president, he's entitled to ex gratia, how then can you scrap it unless I'm not getting the point you're making?
Yes, so my point is, the point I made is one, under Article 68 of the Constitution, that 68 with specific reference to clauses 4 and 5. The president, in addition to his pension, which shall be same as his salary.
Okay, Randolph, hold on a second. We would have to reconnect with you again. Please bear with us. There's a small technical challenge. We'll come back to you. So we'll sort it out and come back to the next minute or two. Please bear with us. Because it's a very important question to me. Because I heard Randolph talk about the fact that even though it is within the right of the president to be paid ex gratia, he can also decide he doesn't want it. Because we saw that of Togbi Afede, didn't we? Where he said, well, I'm entitled to it, but I don't want it. And he brought it back. I think that's where Randolph is coming from. But here's the thing, Mutal, I've heard some people say that noble as the idea is, sorry, let me apologize to you because Richard and Yahweh is also on the line. Richard, okay, sorry.
Yes.
Okay, so I'll say something with you. Bear with us. In the next minute, we will be back with you guys. I beg of you. Just 1 minute. Thank you. So, Mutal, I've heard some people say that noble as this idea is, Ghanaians have called for it. The president has responded. The former president has responded. He says, well, I'm going to do it. But it will not be a very popular decision, even within the party. How do you respond to persons who say or who fear that once the president says he's not going to pay people ex gratia, they may not, necessarily be too enthused about bringing him into power? I mean, do you think is this fear grounded?
Well, More, I think excellent, presentation by the two earlier speakers.
Kwame and Randolph.
But I must say that Randolph has nailed it.
Right.
And I say so because a lot of the things, he seemed to be taking the wind out of my sails.
Right.
Now, Mr. Kwame wondered whether President Mahama could execute this.
Right.
And my response is simple. President Mahama was specific.
Right.
He said that he was going to ensure that the ex gratia for his executive was scrapped.
Right.
And there are several ways by which he was going to do that. One of the ways he could do that, I guess, was stated by Mr. Kwame Asiedu when he said the president can ask all those who are to be appointed in his government that your appointment will not be conditioned of your benefit to the ex gratia.
Right.
And therefore, if you want me to appoint you, or I'm appointing you as a minister or a deputy minister on condition that you will not benefit from the ex gratia. If you agree, maybe perhaps there should be a document that you sign, so that one day you cannot be suing the government for denying you what the Constitution asks that you should. I mean, that is one way. Another way has to do with the revealing or the revelation given by Mr. Randolph when he indicated that if you look at those articles, Articles 114, which talks about MPs, Article 68, which talks about the president, and Article 155, that it is only the president and the vice president and members of parliament and judges of the superior courts. It doesn't mention presidential staffers. And you can imagine the number of presidential staffers appointed by this government and the amount of money that they should. Maybe perhaps some people should go to court, should go to the Supreme Court to interpret this constitutional provision that those people are not entitled to the ex gratia, and therefore they should not be given the ex gratia. So this argument for me is settled. Okay. Another point, and I think that Mr. Seidu asked that question, that President Mahama made the promise in 2015. And I have heard several people who reiterated same and truth position. And I was happy when you pointed out to him, he never categorically said that he was going to scrap ex gratia. Right. And I think that it was in a meeting, I think with labor unions and others, exactly, where he said that he was going to galvanize them to see how best. But he asked a legitimate question, that did he start the process? If he started the process, that we need to know. Maybe perhaps Mr. Kwame Asiedu and others should also be asking the labor union and others whether they were engaged. As a matter of fact, the reason why he couldn't implement this were the very reasons the reasons Mr. Kwame Asiedu pointed out, right, that this is an entrenched clause in our constitution. Maybe the question is, he had the capacity to do what he would have done. So let's even assume that President Mahama couldn't implement it. Nothing prevents him from implementing it now. Okay. And in any case, the two statements are not the same. All right. You have put in context why he made that statement, the forum or the fora that he made that particular statement. Right. And this one, okay, he categorically stated that members of my executive are not going to. But maybe in the subsequent comments, we'll look at the whole gamut of this ex gratia, okay, particularly when it comes to members of parliament, which I am clothed, okay, with information, and I believe that it will help. No, this is awesome. So let's do this. Murtala, now my guests are back on Zoom, but we have to take a break as well. So again, I'll beg of you, Richard and Randolph, we'll just take a minute break, and then when we come back, I'll come to you guys for you to give me your initial comment about the former president's campaign launch and some of the things he's promised to do, and then Murtala will come in as well. So we'll take a break. This is Inside Pages. The WhatsApp line is 0244 097934. 0244 097934. I'll be right back. All right, welcome back. Interesting conversation, insightful as well, isn't it? I want to say a big thanks to you, the audience, and also my resource persons who have patiently, be waiting on Zoom to join this conversation. Richard and Randolph, I'm so grateful that you've been patient enough to join us. Now, let me go back to Randolph for Randolph to land, and then Richard will come in. Randolph, yes, you're making the point, because I was asking you about the fact that Randolph, are you there? Sorry. Good.
Yes, I'm here.
Good.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. And I'm saying that if the president is entitled to his ex gratia, are you also saying that he can waive off that right?
Yes, exactly. I'm saying that it's a right. A right is given. You have a discretion to determine whether you want to take it. It's not a responsibility, okay, which you have to perform. It's a right. And as a right, you can decide to exercise it or otherwise. Absolutely. So I'm saying that one of the easiest ways the president can even adopt is to waive it in his rights. That even though the Constitution gives me the right to an ex gratia payment, I'm okay with just a pension. I don't want the ex gratia. And that in itself will set a precedent for subsequent precedents. That is one. Second way by which we can do that, especially with regard to other members of the executive who are not mentioned as entitled to gratuity, the committee that is set up under Article 71, I believe, are given the terms of reference. So one thing that can be done is when the president sets up the committee, as part of the terms of reference, ex gratia computations should be excluded for all the other persons who the Constitution does not specifically mention them as being entitled to gratuity payments. When we decide to adopt some of these mechanisms, we will only be left with those constitutional provisions where gratuity is actually mentioned, which will now be the judges, parliament, and the president himself. In other when it comes to amendment, because in my thinking, there's only a few category of officers who are entitled to that. So the first is the president can decide to waive his. Secondly, the terms of reference given to the committee can have expressly in there that ex gratia shall not apply to these category of officers. So in your recommendations, don't recommend the payment of ex gratia aside salaries. That would be one of the easiest ways to also go about it if you don't want to go through the nuances of constitutional amendments. Those are some of the ways we can go about it. So in my view, scrapping the ex gratia, either through constitutional amendment or either through political willingness, is something that can easily be done with regard to those officers where the constitution does not specifically mention it as part of their salaries or pensions or benefits. So that is the part I wanted to add to it. And yes, the president can decide to waive it, and it will not be an unconstitutional act or an illegal act if the president decides to let go of his or her ex gratia.
Okay, but how about the other arms of government, the legislature and the judiciary?
Okay, so as I stated when my submission earlier,
Yes.
that with regard to the persons who fall within the constitutional provisions, where the Constitution specifically mentions that you are entitled to ex gratia, I believe that is where the ex-president in his speech indicated that he will work or liaise with the other arms of government for them to also accept same. Because with them, if you look at Article 144, for instance, luckily for us, Article 144 is not part of the entrenched provisions of the Constitution. Similarly, Article 155, which also talks about the entitlement of gratuity to judges, is also not part of the entrenched provisions of the Constitution. So all we need to do to amend those provisions is by an act of parliament.
Okay.
For that purpose, which is easier and not expensive. But when it comes to 68, which talks about ex gratia payment to the president, unfortunately for us, 68 falls under Chapter 8 of the Constitution. And the whole of Chapter 8 is an entrenched provision. So that will mean that we have to go through the procedures under Article 290, among others, to go to amend those provisions. And that's what I'm saying, that if the president, or if that route will even be cumbersome and more expensive, and because at the referendum you need 40% of the population to turn out to vote, and 75% of the persons voting should vote in favor of it. If you are not even certain of that, what we can do is the president on his own or her own can decide that this is a right that the Constitution gives me, and this is a right that I've decided not to take. I'm waiving it. When that is done, it sends a strong political signal to the public and whoever is vying for that office subsequently, that you know what, this person refuses ex gratia. A president, because as part of governance structure, a lot of conventions have been set, a lot of practices. Not everything government does is cut in stone or is legal, but some of them are based on practices, conventions over time. So I believe that if that practice is put in motion, it becomes a fetter or a check on subsequent presidents vis-a-vis their claim or their right to ex gratia. And I believe that once the president is able to waive or say that I don't want my ex gratia, I don't think any minister or deputy minister of state or any appointee of the president can come and say that I'm entitled to, especially when the Constitution does not even name you there as one of the beneficiaries, in my view.
I see. Let me now go to Richard here. Richard, do you in principle agree with the former president that we can't or we won't be able to make any meaningful progress if we do not look at our Constitution again and look at our governance architecture, because it appears to be standing in our way, in terms of our quest to develop as a people? Do you in principle agree with that? And do you in principle, again, agree with the steps the former president believes that if he takes, we will be better for it?
Well, thank you very much, and good morning to your viewers, and very good morning to my two brothers on the line and your good self. There are two issues you raised with me to answer. The first one, whether or not I agree with the former president with his proposal to undo ex gratia, in other words, look at Article 71 and the broader issue of taking a look at our Constitution because somehow its provisions are in our way. The Constitution, perhaps, I would say that it's not in our way but I don't know if that's what the former president said, but I don't think the Constitution is in our way. Sometimes we get in our own way with the politics that is played around it. There are provisions in the Constitution that has to be looked at or that may have to be looked at. The Constitutional Review Committee makes some strong and agreeable recommendations that I think that could be looked at. But even those provisions haven't been in the Constitution this far have helped us. It's not as if they are in our way. So I would disagree with any position that says that the Constitution is in our way. We are often in our own way with our politics. But in agreeing or asking if I agree with the former president or not on the proposal he was making, I would say with an emphatic yes, I do not agree with him. I disagree with him because one, I don't trust him. He cannot be trusted on the subject. I hear my brother Mutala, whom I haven't seen in a bit, except on TV, try to rationalize and soften the position to say that, he didn't say categorically, and then we should go and ask Labour to see if he engaged them. He engaged them to do what? If he wanted to do it, we know where he would start. He just didn't start. He just didn't want to do it. It was one statement or one speech he wants to give and receive applause and walk away. And so was what he gave yesterday, I think a few days ago in Ho. He wanted to receive applause, and so he said it. He's not going to do anything about it, and so is the many things he promised, because we have a guide or more or less history to refer to in respect of his performance here in this country. Everything he said he didn't do. And so if you're asking the simple question whether or not I agree with him, whether he could or he will, I'll tell you no, he won't do it. The real conversation about Article 71, I think I want to commend my brother Ankara Rindolph for his exposition on the matter. It's very clear that there are avenues to do this, and that those could be leadership decisions that needs to be made, that I exercise the right to not accept it and perhaps stimulate people who are joining his administration to go the same direction. And so if that's what he wants to do, he can say that's what he wants to do. And then we ask, why didn't you do it before? Why is it that when you were president, you didn't do that? It's as if he didn't know he could deny or forfeit his right. And so clearly speaking, this is a political conversation. And on the same platform, the former president was talking about shallow populism and sloganeering. But then that's exactly what he's doing. I'm not sure if he thought he was talking about somebody else. He was talking about himself on his own stage, sloganeering and doing shallow populism about an article or provision of our Constitution that a lot of Ghanaians have concerns with, which needs to be looked at. But in looking at it, we have to ask ourselves, what do we replace it with? That is where the conversation is. He didn't talk about that because, look, the political space is not a closed space. It is not determined that only a few people can be there, only some select people can be there. It's an open space. It's a field that all Ghanaians can join in to serve and build our country. In fact, I would say that we need the best and brightest of our society to join the political space to drive the development of our country. So you want to have a system in place that will make it worth their while. Otherwise, you will not attract the best in that space. What we have to do, in addition to finding a remedy for what has become unacceptable or offensive to Ghanaians in the provisions of Article 71, we have to find a practical way of replacing it. And what we replace it with is the conversation we must have. Yes, good solution that leadership can signal by forfeiting that right. and then have that cascade down. But in practical terms, say, for example, you take Parliament, which our earlier speaker was talking about, who had to leave us, talking about that potentially, say, for example, the legislature, individuals who operate in that space incur a lot of debt or go in for some third-party financial support in terms of loans to be able to support their operations, and somehow they count on these gratuities or after-service payments to be able to address those concerns and obligations. So how do you replace that to ensure that you attract the best to Parliament who are determined to be able to go there, that you are not creating incentive for only the rich people in our society to be the ones to go there because they can afford it. That way you exclude and obscure the true definition and extent of democracy, where it is that all of our citizens must participate. And in essence, you are putting financial obstacles in the way of truly every one of the people, of the persons in the people population to be able to join, so that it is not an exclusive club of rich people because they can afford it to be able to be there. So you have to look at it. The replacement must be constructive, and the proposal to deal with that must be one that we look at and then see that is satisfactory. But the point is that this conversation needs to be had, but the person to lead it is not a former president, because he had his chance to deal with this. He didn't, and there are many, many things that he said he was going to do, he didn't do. And so what he was doing the last time, and what I know he's going to be doing here going forward, is to ride on the assumption that Ghanaians have forgotten about his record. Ghanaians have forgotten about the fact that he was president. Because look, when he spoke the last time in Ho, the only thing that made me remember, if you were watching objectively, that he was a former president of this country once before, is the address to him as former president. And then when he said that he already knows the Jubilee House and therefore doesn't need anybody to hold his hand. Everything else that he said presupposes that he is branding himself as someone who has not been there before. Because when you're talking about there's a lot of harm that has been done to our country, excuse me, you have done great and grave harm to this country when you were there. So if you create that impression and you are supposing that you have not been there before, but you have been, and we have that record, which we're going to discuss very extensively. But to begin with, on this subject, he picked the wrong subject to lead his conversation about dealing with ex gratia. He should have, in actual fact, tell us what was on his way, what effort he made, and what prevented him the last time. If he said so, I guess that we'll be having a different conversation discussing the obstacles that prevented him from moving forward. In the suggestion of our brother Rindolph would have been that what prevented you for not forfeiting the right? And even now as we speak, part of those rights that you're enjoying, what prevents you today from forfeiting them? You still are enjoying the benefits of that provision. And then you say when you come, you scrap it. Why can't you scrap it today for yourself,
Richard,
now that you have the power?
Richard, what rights exactly is the former president enjoying that you want him to forfeit? This is his pension that's being paid him?
Yeah, for example, the former president still receives salary. Okay,
Yeah, but
that's such
but
rights.
The former president, no, but the former president retires on his salary, doesn't he?
Well, I'm saying that it's part of the provision. But that's to not, the extent
but that's not what the former president says he will scrap. He's talking about gratuity. He's talking about ex gratia, not payment of salary when you leave office.
No, if you listen to me, I'm saying that it's part of the provision that he benefits from. So he can scrap that, he can deny that, or it's a right. It's a right that accrued to him. He can forfeit that right. Okay?
No,
henceforth, I have elected to forfeit that right to myself, and therefore that is a signal that when I do come, I will actually act on it.
But Richard, sorry, we need to clarify this point. The former president was explicit. He was very clear in articulating what exactly it is that when he gets another opportunity to become president, he will abolish, and that has to do with ex-gratia. I didn't hear him say he would, for instance, abolish if you're former president, being paid, say, your electricity bills, taking care of your health, salaries. I didn't hear him say that. I think he was explicit, he was clear, he was categorical about something. So I don't know why you're saying that all the rights entitled to him. I don't know why you're moving the discussion to that in that direction.
Moro, I'm not sure if you asked me to come here and say what the former president said.
No, I'm just saying. I just want us to be on the same.
Allow me to make the point. I'm not sure what you're trying to guide me to do. I am telling you that a former president has a certain rights that accrue to him by virtue of being former president.
Yes.
And the moral of that offer that he's making, that when he comes, he'll do away with the ex-gratia, is to save Ghanaians money. Is that not the case?
Yes, it's a safe. Yes, it's
that's the moral.
Yes,
that's the moral of it. And I'm saying that he's costing Ghanaians as we speak. Ghanaians are spending money on him, which he wants to say that we are in a difficult place as a country. And if we're in a difficult place, when he comes, benefits that accrue to him as president and members of the executive, he will cause it to disappear so that Ghanaians don't continue to lose money. And I'm saying that right now, as he spoke, or he is speaking, when he spoke in Ho, he was costing Ghanaians money. So if you want to save Ghanaians money, which is why you want to become president.
Richard, that's a bit of an overstretch. That's a bit of an overstretch.
Sorry? No, please.
That's a bit of an overstretch, Richard.
No, Moro, I am making my point. You are not determining what point I am making. Okay. We are having a conversation about expenditure. Is that not the case?
Yes.
We're having a conversation about expenditure.
Yes.
And that expenditure is happening now. For which reason he said, when I come, I will try to cut expenditure. I'm saying that the conversation now is how do we cut expenditure? He's part of the expenditure Ghana is making. His salary is part of the expenditure. So if he says that he was going to forfeit that benefit, then start forfeiting that now so people can believe you. The point I am making is credibility point I am making, Moro. So if Ghanaians or I ought to believe him by what he said, then I want to see evidence, because the history he has in this country doesn't give me confidence to believe, because he said he was going to repeal it. Whatever spin my good brother Mutala is putting on it is not the spin I saw when he said it was categorical, that he was going to do something. And in fact, Richard, where he was standing when he made the promise, he was the president.
Richard, with all due respect, with all due respect, I think you're the one who's putting a spin on this. Because I said to you from the beginning that it is written in black and white, and I can read it to you where the former president speaks to a particular issue. He says, I will scrap ex-gratia when I get the chance. He's not talking about scrapping all the other things that are entitled to public office holders when they leave their office. So to stretch it to, so anything else that you spend on a public office holder when they leave office, must be something that must be abolished because we want to save, cost. I think it's a bit of an overstretch. Unless, of course, you don't want to agree with me, that's fine. But I'm just saying that because people are watching, and we don't want a situation where people will say that, look, unless, of course, we are spinning or we didn't understand what the former president said, and I'm sitting here and I'm listening to you say the things you're saying, and I'm not putting you to strict proof. That's why I'm saying that, per my understanding of what the former president said, he said specifically ex gratia. He didn't mention salary, he didn't mention medical bills, he didn't mention utility bills, something like that. So let's not split hairs over this, but I think it's a straightforward matter. Now, I asked the question about...
Sorry, Imoro, you won't be doing justice to inviting me on the program and you are telling me what to say.
No, I'm not.
Look, wait, Moro, wait. I don't appreciate this back and forth. Your viewers are educated. In fact, everybody who is watching us now, perhaps much more experienced and educated than those of us who have the privilege to be on your program. The argument I am making is that the reason the former president said that he would do away or scrap ex-gratia is to save the country money. Is that not the case?
I agree with you.
So if that is the case, he's costing the state now. And I'm telling you on the backdrop of the fact that he had said this before and couldn't do it. So for us to believe him, for Ghanaians to believe him, he must begin to demonstrate, unless you're not following the line of argument I am making.
Okay, that's fine.
Which is to say that if you are going to repeal the article, which you had said before, then we want to believe you this time by demonstrating, because I, for one, when I started, said, I don't believe him. So if I don't believe him, what he will do for me and people from my background who don't believe him now, to believe him is for him to begin to demonstrate. So I don't know where you are
Okay.
getting lost
No,
in this
I understand what you're
conversation.
saying. I understand what
Is
you're
that
saying. I understand what you're saying.
yeah, so please, if you have me here, let me have a conversation because your viewers are listening.
Okay, go ahead.
You are not putting me to any proof. I have not said anything for which you needed proof.
Okay.
I am rationalizing a position to you to say that the former president's promise cannot be believed because he had occasion to make that promise, to fulfill that promise. He didn't.
Okay.
And so when he's making it now, I can't believe him. The only way I can believe him is if he demonstrates to me now that what he didn't do before, which is say that, you know what, Ghana is in a difficult place and my party and myself say cut cost. And so to achieve that, me, the former president who is benefiting from a constitutional provision to retire on my salary, I am forfeiting that salary. Okay. It is his right. It is for him to do it. So I don't know why you are interrupting me and trying to say that I'm putting a certain spin on the thing. It's not.
I understand what you're
Please,
saying.
if you have us here, let us have a conversation. Because if you have Mutala come, he will say the way he sees it, where he was going to say that the former president didn't make a categorical promise, which it is that is made. Okay, I want us to have a conversation on the believability of the former president. Everything else he says cannot be believed unless he demonstrates to us, because he had the opportunity of being president. He didn't deliver on that. But I'm telling you that the actual conversation of trying to do something about Article 71 is a real conversation in this country. A lot of Ghanaians are concerned, and some of them very offended by it. But the point is that it occupies a space in our political space, in our democracy, to ensure and provide certain comforts, which I see in extending the argument, the explanation of my brother Randolph, is to say that it is also an incentive, to draw in my view, to draw in qualified people who can come into our space, because the political space is not closed. Right. When people come in, they must see that public service will be worth their while for them to come in. It's sacrifice to begin with, but it should also be an occasion where people come and they don't feel from the outset that it was going to be a disadvantage to them. That genuine conversation exists for us to have. The former president is only leveraging on the concerns of Ghanaians to say that he will scrap ex gratia, which I know he will not do, but he's just saying it for political profit. And I think that the point must be made that he cannot be believed to be the one who lead this conversation. He cannot be believed to be the one who helps Ghana resolve this issue with Article 71, which so many Ghanaians are concerned with. He's only trying to harvest the concerns of Ghanaians for his political advantage. And that was the point I want to make, Moro.
Richard, please stay with us. Don't go. Let me pick the response or reaction from Ibrahim Mutala Mohammed. Now, Ibrahim Mutala, the credibility, the trustworthiness of the former president is being called into question. You heard Richard Anyagba. He says that his believability quotient is low because he has had 4 years to have implemented this policy. He did not. Why must we believe that the former president would do it this time around?
Muru, I enjoyed watching Cartoon Network. And in fact, let me finish. And in fact, last night, I watched a lot. You can see that I'm so exhausted. I love watching cartoons, Scooby-Doo. So I know Scooby-Doo. Yes, so when I was watching and listening to my brother, if I didn't bring myself to speed, for a moment I thought I was watching Scooby-Doo.
No, that's not fair.
No, I'm not saying him.
No,
I'm not
making... You said you thought... But you said
no, I said if I didn't bring myself back, I thought I was still having a reflection.
No, but that's still not fair.
I was having a reflection. Can I finish? I was having a reflection of what I was watching last night. And I'm not saying him. And I'm not making a reference.
But you're saying that his commentary on
Don't
the former president...
the right to say how I feel? I'm telling you how I felt.
Okay, please go ahead.
By the way, it is not the Constitutional Review Committee. It is the Constitutional Review Commission. There's a sharp difference between a commission and a committee. I thought my brother would have played the ball. Instead, he was playing the man. You ask him a simple question, whether he agrees with the statement made by the former president. You may hate President Mahama, but you would have to agree with him. Because I listened to him yesterday, on one radio station. And he admitted that, yes, he agrees with that statement. But today he said that, no, he disagreed with the statement, and that the only statement he seemed to be agreeing with happened yesterday was the fact that President Mahama said that he didn't need, or he doesn't need anybody to take him around the Flagstaff House. What a contradictory. I think that our politics...
I heard Richard, in fact, well, the first thing he said was that he agrees with the principle of scrapping. No,
I'm not saying, you asked him whether he agrees with the...
On the issue of...
And he said he doesn't agree with him.
On the issue of scrapping... He says he agrees.
Moro, you asked him whether he agrees with the former president.
Yes.
And he categorically states that he doesn't disagree.
No,
Hold
he
on.
says he agrees with the former president.
I'm making two different statements.
Okay.
He said he doesn't agree with the former president. That was the first statement. And that the only thing that happened yesterday, which he seemed to agree with the former president, was when he said that he doesn't need anybody to take him around the...
No. Utala, I heard him too.
Moro,
I beg.
You're viewing public. Let your producer...
I'll tell you what I heard.
Moro, I am prepared to give 5 minutes of my time up.
For us to play back what he said.
I am prepared to do that.
If it's possible, can we do it? Because you know why? I am
prepared to give 5 minutes of my time for you to do that.
Okay.
Moro, let me make my point.
I've told the viewers what I heard. It is okay to tell the viewers what you heard.
Moro, but
please go ahead.
Moro, but you gave him a lot of time.
No, please go ahead. Yes, go ahead.
I hope you give me some time.
I will.
Now, he said that he disagrees with the former president, and he thinks that and the reason why he disagrees with the former president because he's not credible. Seriously. And he went ahead to talk about the justification of why he thinks the former president is not credible because he made that promise in 2015 and he couldn't deliver. Moro, that is not my statement. You read same statement to Mr. Kwame Asiedu, that this was what he said.
Right.
He said that he was going to galvanize, categorical, the labor unions and others to see what they could do. Right. What former President Mahama said yesterday was that I am going to ensure that the ex gratia for the executive is going to be scrapped.
Right.
And in any case, if assuming without admitting that the former President Mahama promised that in 2015 and he couldn't fulfill, and that justifies the outrageous, incredibility of President Mahama in the eyes of my brother Richard Ahiagba, I want to give him catalog of promises made by this super corrupt, incompetent President Nanado, which he couldn't fulfill. And if you want to go by that logic, then I think that anything that comes out from the mouth of President Nanado should never be tolerated. He told the people of this country he was going to make Accra the cleanest city in some few months. Is Accra clean? He told the people of this country, in fact, it wasn't only the president. The entire government said, you are not going to IMF, including you. We are at IMF. President Nanado told people in February 2016 that he was not going to run family and friends government. He has run to the extent that baby mamas were given appointments in his government. Should we trust whatever comes out of his mouth? He said he was not going to run a huge government. In fact, in the history of this country, not even in the Fourth Republic, we have never had a huge government than we experienced under this government in 2017 when President Nanado became the president in his first term. 120 plus ministers were appointed. So if we want to discredit people and doubt and challenge the credibility of presidents or former presidents, then President Nanado should not even open his mouth. A lot of promises he made to the people of this country, he refused and he couldn't fulfill them. Now, play the ball. Let's look at the principle. President Mahama said, this is what I'm going to do. And I thought that he was going to anchor his discussions on the specific contributions made by the two aspects. Now, raising the issue of what is said in Article 115, Article 68, and Article 155 of the 1992 Constitution, and providing us with the evidences that certain categories of people who have enjoyed the ex gratia haven't been mentioned. I thought that the argument was going to be dwelled on that. You want us to look at the record of President Mahama, and he said, once again, that the reason is that look at the record of President Mahama, as if Ghanaians have forgotten. Maybe if you have lost touch, let me just enumerate the record of President Mahama vis-a-vis the mess that your government has created. President Mahama, in fact, created more jobs than you. And that explains why. At the time he handed over the reins of this government to you and your gang of incompetent and corrupt dudes, unemployment was 6.8. You have taken it to 17.4.
President Mahama, indeed, at the time when he was there, you described him as incompetent. Dollar to the cedi was 3.6, 3.7. You have taken it to 13 cedis today. At the time President Mahama was leaving office, and by the way, President Nana Addo promised the people of this country that he was going to reduce our dependency on others just for basic foods. The Ministry of Trade records, and you can check it at the Ministry of Agri, government of Ghana was spending a little over $500 million in the importation of rice and poultry products into this country in 2016. You took it from a little over $500 million to over $2 billion. This is what you have done. And in fact, inflation, the President Mahama, you think that he doesn't have any record, and therefore he cannot be trusted. You took inflation from him 15%. Today, inflation is over 50%. Insecurity, as a matter of fact, in 2018, first quarter report of the security situation in this country, the Ghana police themselves said that we never registered armed robbery up to the level we registered it in the first quarter of 2018. So if you want to talk about mess, tell me, which country has created the mess we are experiencing today? Maybe perhaps Richard Anyagbo and others do not experience the mess that is occasioned by the incompetence, the corruption of their government. And that is the reason why he thinks that President Mahama didn't do well. CDD, the last time I checked, they are not friends to the NDC. The CDD described President Nana Addo's administration as the most corrupt ever in the history of this country. He can go and read the Afro Barometer. In fact, transparency, the Corruption Perception Index, the highest we have ever registered, Richard Anyagbe, in this country, happened under President Mahama when we scored 48%, the highest in the history of this country. Under you, the lowest of President Mahama was 43%. What you are celebrating today, if it is not mediocre, you are celebrating your performance under the Corruption Perception Index. The lowest of President Mahama is what you are celebrating today. So, Richard, when we talk about decency in governance and government who have done well, your government has no place. As a matter of fact, when we are talking about people who are engaged in evil, we don't even mention Satan. In terms of evil, this government is Satan. And in any case, let's look at even the monies we borrowed, juxtaposing that with deliverables. President Mahama borrowed a little over 40 billion. There are projects to show, including where you are coming from, Richard. There are projects to show. You don't need to go far. Come out. Let me take you to Circle. Let me take you to Rich Hospital. Let me take you to University of Ghana Medical Center. Let me take you to the Bank Hospital. Go to every single district. You would find projects that were executed with the 40 billion that President Mahama indeed borrowed. You have borrowed over 400 billion. There is nothing to show. If there is anything to show, let's compare them. Now you sit there in your comfort and you think that President Mahama hasn't done any well. If we want to talk about those who have delivered, and that should be a license on which they should comment on national issues, I think that President Nana Addo will be in a perpetual state of incommunicado because he has nothing to show to the people of this country. And to be very honest, I have listened to more slippery statements made out of uninformed positions by people who head institutions. I have never heard the kinds of slippery statements I heard from my brother. If you hate President Muhammad that much, you can talk about the hatred, but don't deny the fact that the statement he has made indeed has occasioned the discussions of everybody. Okay. And I thought that you were going to anchor your debate and your discussions on the statement. Right. If we come to look at the things President Mahama said, which you disagree, then you do that. I expect his response not to play the ball. Okay. He should respond to the issues I have raised and see whether he can challenge a single one of them.
So Richard, he raises another issue, and he says that if the principle or the philosophy behind the abolition or the cause for the abolishment or his proposal to abolish ex gratia is to save the public kitty, then he might as well deny himself the salary. He says, I don't want, he should say he doesn't want his salary. I mean, he doesn't want all the other things that have been, because the idea is that you want to save the public kitty. So why are you taking salary and yet to save the public kitty?
This is the most preposterous statement. Why? And to be very honest with you, I don't expect such statements come from this gentleman. The salary they pay to President Mahama is the same salary that is paid to President Kufuor. President Mahama was denied what the Constitution asks you to do. You refuse to give him accommodation. And let me tell you this, and maybe perhaps the people of this country are unaware. President Mahama was given an accommodation to live in as a vice president. So it means that that accommodation was befitting of a vice president and not a president. President Mahama lived there as a vice president. When he became president of the Republic of Ghana, he decided that I feel comfortable there, I still want to live there. By the estimation of the standard of house given to presidents and vice presidents, he should have moved. President Mahama refused and stayed there. Okay? Now, when President Mahama ended office, constitutionally, you were supposed to provide him with accommodation. President Kufuor wanted to take that building, that giant building, where the National Youth Employment Program is. You denied him his right. President Mahama lives in his private home. Once again, the same Richard lied on TV that President Mahama, his air tickets were bought, he was given a lot. He said no and said, challenge you to provide evidences. Or where you buy my air ticket, pay his office, in fact, his office space, he rented it. The state ought to have provided same for him, just as they provide for President Kufuor. He's paying his electricity bill, paying his water bill. All these things, you refuse to do what is supposed to be done.
Medical bills.
I'm saying everything President Mahama does that. Now you sit here and then you tell us that he should forfeit the salary or whatever allowances that are given to him. It is not your right to determine whether he takes it. It is the Constitution which enjoins you to do that. Even aspects where the Constitution asks you to do, you have denied him those rights. Okay. You have denied, and in any case, President Mahama has repeatedly indicated that he's talking about the fact that the democratic space, maybe perhaps is just a malaprop. Because if you appreciate those terms, even President Mahama or anybody has the same right to engage in that democratic space. It doesn't matter whether President Mahama wants to run as the president of Ghana again. It doesn't matter. As long as he remains a citizen, he deserves that right to make comments and make suggestions within the same democratic space, if you appreciate that space anyway. Okay. But I'm saying that all those statements he has made, it demonstrates the hatred that they have for President Mahama. Look, I disagree with President Nana Addo, but I am on record to have commended him for some of the things he did. So the fact that you disagree with President Mahama politically, don't take it to that level of hatred. But I can tell you, the people of this country, and I challenge you, let's have a meeting to sit and look at what we have borrowed and what you have delivered. Okay. If we are talking about delivery, your government is the most useless government ever in the history of this country. People like you are being paid. You were paid with the taxpayers' money. What is your contribution to this country as compared to President Mahama? And you think that you have the right to question whether President Mahama should legitimately engage in the democratic space? Okay, so, I think that we should respect the democratic principles. Right, Richard. He will make those statements and they. But let me conclude on this. Have you seen the house President Mahama was living in? When we lost power, the house was given to Dr. Baumia. The wife went there and said the house was unbefitting of their status. They had to put up 2 huge buildings in that building. 2 huge buildings for Dr. Baumia and the family to sit in. President Mahama, as a president, was living in there. 2 huge buildings. And I challenge your station to go there and find out. At the expense of the state. And this gentleman thinks that President Mahama doesn't have the right to comment on this space. Look, the mess that have been created by this country is created by the incompetence, the corruption, and in fact, with all seriousness, the thievery that goes on in this government. If a government could add $800 million into a merit deal, criminally, $800 million, but for the vigilance of the NDC members of parliament, the state would have been paying this money. Okay. You have the audacity to talk about those who should have the right to comment within the democratic space.
Richard, I'll come back to you for your concluding remarks, but let me just quickly do this. Currently ongoing is the 1-week celebration of former Ghanaian international Christian Atsu, who passed on a few weeks ago in Turkey when an earthquake struck the country whilst was plying his trade in Syria. Now, two dignitaries there present includes the Ghana Football Association President, Kurt Edwin Simon Okreku, the former Black Stars coach, Kwesi Appiah, former GFA Vice President, George Afriye, Kempong, Pastor Lawrence Tete, clergy from the Lighthouse Chapel. Also in attendance is the Minister of Youth and Sports, Honorable Yusuf Mustafa, the Ghana Supporters Union, former GFA President Kwesi Nyantakyi, family members and friends of the Trasam family. I'm told that, are there any videos okay, so here's the thing. As you can see being shown on your screens, the celebration of the 1 week celebration of our beloved Christian Atsu, former Black Stars player. We continue to have in our prayer. So let me come back to Richard. Richard, before I come back to you for concluding remarks, Let me do this. It says, good morning, my brother. Please tell Mr. Ahiagwa that it's a privilege for him speaking in your studio this morning, not that he knows more than any other person. It is very clear that the MPP has lost reality with the people. Say good morning to my brother, Morambo Mutala, for me. This is from Alhaji Yakubu Sainerogo Kukuo. I wonder why the MPP will make such a terrible mistake by appointing this Richard Ahiagwa as Director of Communications. Is far worse than Boabia Samoa. It doesn't... okay, all right. And this one says, what Richard Ahiagwa is saying makes a lot of sense. If the former president is saying that he wants to save the public kitty by abolishing ex-gratia, then he should also forfeit his salary. Why can't Murtala understand this simple thing? Let me also say a very good morning. Let me do this. Let me say a very good morning to Richard Ahiagwa. I think it's one of the best things that's happened to the MPP in his capacity as Director of Communications. Richard, keep it up. I'm watching this show for the first time because Richard is on. And Moro, thank you very much for this program. Please tell Richard to always make it a point to be on this show because it's always refreshing hearing from him. That's coming from Nanecha from where? From Ablekuma South. Okay. Is ex-gratia going to be scrapped only at the GM when given the opportunity or for once and forever? MP's campaign message, I believe, is going to be centered on Mr. MAHAMA, COVID-19, Ukraine, and Russia for their incompetence. Komla Agbeli sends that. Now, Isaka Saliu from Sunyani says the government should drastically reduce the number of ministers, deputy ministers, CEOs, board of directors to avoid waste. And it says, until that, Richard Ahiagwa should stop diverting serious issues on inside pages. Richard Ahiagwa should be serious for once. Now, Richard, let me take your concluding remarks just briefly in about 2 minutes because we've run out of time. Richard, so in conclusion, you're saying apart from the ex-gratia, which you agree in principle must be scrapped, you don't see anything positive with what for the former president and all the things that the former president has said because you don't trust him. Hello, Richard? Yeah, please unmute. Richard, please unmute. Hello? Hello, Richard?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you now. Please go ahead. So your concluding remarks in 2 minutes. Yes.
Why you're saying that I should give a concluding remark when you just saw Murtala in your studio who had talked about this subject before I came in. I only have one time to speak about this.
No, he hasn't.
And he has made a lot of personal attacks. And you said I should make a concluding remark on what? What am I concluding on? I need to address all the issues that he has raised. Murtala talked about unemployment. So you're either going to give me the time or you will not. So I can address all the things that is...
Please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Murtala talks about employment under former President Mahama. One, I don't have any hatred for the former president. The argument I made is clear. It's about principle that you say you will do A, demonstrate to us you will do A, because when he told us you will do A the last time, you didn't do it. So it's evident that I said that. If for that reason he thinks I hate former President Mahama, so be it. But I don't. The issue about employment, and I'll take the issue. I heard him say that we should address the issue. Former President Mahama inherited this country as a president on January 7th, 2013. This economy, the growth at the time was about 7.3% GDP. In 2014, a year after he's been in office, 2014, the economy grew at 4%. It shrunk from the 7.3 he inherited. We didn't attain that growth. In 2015, the economy that under him grew at 4%, shrank again, grew at 3.9 in 2015. Under him, in 2016, this economy that grew under him at 3.9 shrank and grew at 3.7%. Okay, so now you show me that your economy is contracting and you are creating jobs. Murtala, please, look at the numbers. The real sector, Moro, which measures productivity. You're looking at the agriculture, you're looking at industry and service. Under former President Mahama, this sector underperformed. Okay, this sector is underperformed. In 2016, actually in 2013, when it came, services sector growth at the time stood at 10.1%. in 2014, under former President Mahama, when he's been in office for 1 year, shrunk from the 10.1 he inherited to 5.2. We're only able to grow at 5.2. In 2015, 5.2 shrunk further. The services sector grew 2.9%. In 2016, the services sector shrunk again, grew at 8%, 2.8%. You can look at the agri sector shrunk. He started from 5.7, it went to 0.9 in 2014. In 2015, 2.1, and in 2016, 2.7. You go to the industry sector. If you are creating jobs, this is the sector you measure from. So we're just not talking. He talks about we have borrowed. Please, Murtala is in parliament as a parliamentarian. He knows the debt analysis report that is done. This government has borrowed less. He talks that we have borrowed about 400 billion. He's just repeating what his communication director always go about saying falsely. We have not borrowed that much. You should just go to the, if you want, I'll do the analysis for you. I just did that in my press conference the last time. These are real numbers that Murtala can see. So if you sit here and what you want to do is to denigrate and do personal attack, please be familiar with your numbers. You cannot be creating employment with this kind of growth report. It is not clear. It is not doable. You cannot do it. The numbers don't justify the position you are saying. We are here, yes, inflation is high. But if you take former President Mahama, when he took office, inflation was about, I think, 13.8% or so. He increased inflation all through the time that he was in office. He never reduced inflation. And when you ask them, sometimes when they talk about, inflation was at one point single digit over a period of time. When he came to office in 2013, inflation was 13.5%. In 2014, inflation went up under former President John Dramani Mahama to 17%. In 2015, 17.7%. Then went to IMF in 2016, it became 15.4%. So the number